Finding ways to be financially savvy is a smart move, and knowing you could be saving money for the things you really want, like that dream home or new ride, is a great feeling. That's why the State Farm Personal Price Plan can help you save when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the Personal Price Plan. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Hey there, fictional friends, and welcome to another episode of Fully Booked. I'm Megan.
And I'm Arthur.
And it's just the two of us this week.
That's right.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, that's right.
That's right, Sharon.
That's just like your name when you get annoyed with her. It's just Sharon. You're like, you're Sharon now. So it's just the two of us this week, and it's almost the end of May. I shouldn't say it's actually the end of May. We're still got a couple of weeks left, but it's almost the end of May. We're heading into fun new summer release season, or at least it feels that way.
Yeah, there's a couple one coming up, so.
That's it. So, we kind of figured it would be a fun week to do a revisit of like a series that we've watched before, but to talk about something a little bit different for a change, because like this, to be fair, this isn't a straight up adaptation that we're talking about, which we normally do.
It's an amalgamation of adaptation.
Kind of, yeah, exactly. No, I think that's a good way of describing it. So this week we decided to do a return and rewatch of the Fear Street franchise on Netflix, which is actually the day this episode drops is getting a new entry into the series with Fear Street Prom Queen.
Yeah. Shady Side isn't done with us yet.
No. So if just quick context for maybe if people aren't aware, I mean, if you're not, like, there'll be some spoilers and stuff, and also just like, so be aware of that, but also just like go watch it. They're really fun.
Seriously, the 3 movies, they're great.
Yeah.
There's great follow-through storyline.
That's it. The rounds
up really well at the end.
The through line's really good. The payoff is really good. It's worth it. So I guess like just a little bit of context for people. So Fear Street, the original trilogy was released each week during over a 3-week span, I should say, in July of 2021 on Netflix, and is based on, I shouldn't say a straight up adaptation because it's not, they are based on R.L. Stine's Fear Street series. So for people who are maybe only aware, R.L. Stine, who's still writing to this day, was extremely, extremely big back in the 80s and 90s with like the sort of like preteen and YA set. Largely, I would say because of Goosebumps. I feel like if you haven't heard of Goosebumps at this point, like you're living under a rock, because it just feels like something that even if you never read the books as a kid, you probably saw an episode of the show at some point.
Yeah, there's been reruns.
There have been the new movies with like Jack Black that have come out and stuff too. They're not bad, like in recent years. So like, there's been enough kind of out there. So, but maybe like some people, maybe prior to this series, weren't quite aware, but R.L. Stine went from Goosebumps, which is largely for like the preteen set, because a lot of the characters are, that 10 to 12 age-ish, and it's a lot more like monsters and like little spooky-ooky things and haunted stuff a little bit.
Basically, Scooby-Doo.
Kind of. Yeah, like Scooby-Doo. Maybe a little bit creepier to a degree, in my opinion anyway. At least as a kid, when you read them, you're like, oh, God. But above and beyond after like the Goosebumps thing, he kind of transitioned into writing the Fear Street series, which started in the late 80s, if I'm not mistaken. 87, 88, something like that. And again, would have multiple entries into this series, and it focuses more on...
Fear Street has over 50 books.
Yeah, there you go. And that's just Fear Street, so like, yikes.
That's it.
And it focuses largely on like the more YA set. So the characters tend to be teenagers and not preteens. They're a little bit darker, a little bit gritty. I've read a few of them. They're a little bit darker than Goosebumps. It feels less campy, and they're more focused in. There is a lot of supernatural stuff in them, but they also feel largely focused in the reality of like a physical killer who's murdering kids in the books and stuff like that. There are more stakes, obviously, because it's for an older set of readers.
It's more real, right?
Exactly. So, and in, 2021, very ambitiously, Netflix decided to, I think originally Fox had the rights to these before they were purchased by Disney.
Yeah, and it went into like development hell and
that's
everything.
It, yeah, and they were meant to be doing like a theatrical run of all 3 films, but then that never wound up happening. So when like Netflix swooped in, picked up the rights, and then did a 3-week consecutive release. So each individual film, they all are tied together. They all follow one through line of a story set in the fictional town of Shadyside. Shadyside is where basically all of the Fear Street novels take place. Not some of them go back in time and they play in period things and stuff like that too, but the majority of them take place in Shadyside, which is a small town in Ohio. Because I believe that R.L. Stine is from Ohio, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I think that's where, so I think that's where most of his stories take place, like very middle America. The I guess, through line of the Fear Street series in this particular case. Like I said, it's not a direct adaptation of any one or multiple individual Fear Street books. It's an adaptation of kind of the universe, and inspired by, I should say, the idea of Fear Street itself. Like, I believe that the Fear Street, there's, a witch character at the center of this trilogy named Sarah Fear, and I believe that her character does make an appearance in the books at some point. That makes sense. Because there are period pieces that go back in time to examine certain things with some characters, and I believe that Sarah Fear exists in that universe. And this all has to do with the town of Shadyside that essentially at its core is cursed allegedly by a witch named Sarah Fear, who was executed in 1666, and since that time the town of Shadyside has been plagued by all manner of every type of miserable bad luck you could think of, essentially. And it's like one of the most...
Or just death by killers.
Mostly death. Mostly people who seemingly wake up one morning possessed and go on to murder multiple victims without explanation, essentially.
Yeah, it's like named the murder capital of America, essentially. So it's pretty bad, and it just consistently keeps happening since... 17th
the
century.
1600s, exactly. Yeah, that's it. So it consistently just happens every X number of years. And this particular, I guess, storyline follows a young group of people who start to realize that there's more to the story of the cursed witch than they originally thought there was when there's another rash of killings that takes place. They start to look deeper into the story. They kind of... take a look back in time at what's previously happened, and they unravel the mystery of Shadyside and why the curse of Sarah Fear seems to have plagued the town for, over 300 years at this point. And they kind of, that's it, work to solve that problem.
They try to do the whole thing of, the witch there. She, apparently from what they understand, is that she cursed the town.
Yes.
And her hand was cut off, and, it's the hand that holds... the town in
its clutches,
even after her death and everything. So they try to reunite. Yeah. I guess they're thinking that we should reunite the hand and let her rest in peace.
Yeah, there's a thing with a rhyme about Sarah Fear about hand and body needing to be returned to one
together.
Another.
Yeah, so that's what they're trying to do, but they're also finding out that there's a lot more to this than
there's a reason. Yeah, that's it. It's not really just a witch curse. And honestly, spoiler alert, it's not really a witch's curse that's causing all of this. It is a deal with the devil, but Sarah Fear is not the one who was responsible for that, essentially. And so as they start looking into all of this, they unravel the entire mystery. I won't give away too much if you haven't watched them, but they essentially unravel the entire mystery. Every film entry takes place in a different time period. So part 1 is set in 1994.
Yes.
Part 2 goes back in time for some backstory into 1978.
Into a killer camp. or a camp killer.
I love a camp slasher. I really like 78 because I really love a camp slasher, like like a Friday the 13th sleepaway camp.
That's exactly what they
and
were
those
doing.
and this one is definitely, each of these films is almost like, the third part maybe not as much, but it's almost like an homage to a particular time period of film. So 1994 is very Scream heavy. It's sort of
very
meta and self-aware.
Yeah.
The characters are very sarcastic and very snippy about everything.
There's even scenes that almost portray some of the scenes
the
from
cold
the
open
Scream
is
franchise.
like,
There's a couple of kills like that too. It's very Scream-esque.
Very, very Scream-esque, which again makes sense because that, in horror, Scream sort of defined the 90s in general, even though it was released in like the later half of the 90s. It basically, when you think of the 90s and you think of horror, you think of the Scream franchise. And then 1978, it goes back to sort of that beginning of that golden age of slasher films. So 1978 is actually when Halloween was originally released. And post that, sort of everything subsequently that would follow in that style. And so, obviously, they pay homage to that, but since it's set at a summer camp, you have a lot of summer camp specific stuff. So like Sleepaway Camp, which was released in the 80s, Friday the 13th, which had multiple entries released in the 80s as well. And you can really see, again, there are shots that are almost mimicked, like sort of frame by frame to a degree between Friday the 13th and
I don't know why, like on social media, the I don't know if it was Netflix or the Fear Street accounts, they tried to... I
think it was Netflix.
They tried to say that it was filmed in the same locations as some of the Friday the 13th movies, but it wasn't.
It wasn't, no. No, it was filmed it was filmed very close to it, so I think that's why there was an error that might have been made at the time. Hopefully.
It looks very similar. If you don't know this, you kind of think that this is the case.
Like a lot of us wouldn't necessarily at first glance. You'd be like, "Is that the actual camp where they filmed Friday the 13th?"
And you think like, "Oh, that would be really cool because it makes a lot of sense if they do that and everything."
But, and it feels like
exactly,
like a true homage at that point, basically. So, and then part 3 takes us back.
1978, kind of like the whole point of that movie is that it introduces the lore about the curse, right? Like
you get so it exists in 1994, but it's more surface level of just this like lore that exists in Shadyside. We're cursed by a witch, blah blah. But then 1978 leads the characters to discoveries of artifacts that maybe prove that there was more to that story than simply a witch deciding for no reason to put a curse on a town.
Yeah, so there's a very good follow through, and you get more and more as you watch those movies, like kind of what is actually happening, and it subverts what you think is going on from the beginning. So it's great in that sense, So there's like, the whole generational trauma and the persecution if you're different, and it kind of also subverts the traditional horror tropes and everything.
Yeah, and they do that in every single entry. Kind of explores the idea of otherness in terms of 1994, the early 90s queerness and things like that were not really something that was quite as readily accepted as it is now. And so there is a love story at the core of the film that involves two women, right? So there are two girls who are in love with each other. But again, people were much more likely to be closeted at that time because it would have been much less accepted. And so there's that idea of otherness and being judged for that. That translates back into the 1978 entry, which discusses the idea of that one gets a lot more into the socioeconomic side of things and the quote unquote weirdos from Shadyside being different and not fitting their counterpart Sunnyvale, which is the next town over, which always seems to, for no reason, again, since it's right next door, prosper and be doing incredibly well all the time, and is like a shining example of sort of quote unquote the American dream to a degree, right? White picket fences, beautiful families, beautiful big houses, everyone runs successful businesses and do all of these things. And meanwhile, Shadyside, in turn, is the total opposite and suffers for all of that and is consistently plagued by tragedy, essentially. So that explores that idea of otherness with some of the major characters in 1978. And then 1978 takes us way back to 1666. So you actually get the Sarah Fierce story,
the original story,
which is very cool to see what
and
the
very
actual
different
I know
from what you think it is.
Definitely, that's it, which takes you back. And again, that one also explores the idea of obviously otherness, yes, because there's also a queer storyline at the heart of that, particular entry into the series, but also explores the idea of kind of like kids will be kids, sort of, you know, and the idea that like children in any generation at any time, we're always going to want to rebel to an extent and do something different. Exactly, that's it. And, you know, that the only reason that things as a rule with those things, especially when they're as innocent as they are like in this, when they go wrong, is really due to the adults not accepting that this is sort of the way that like a younger generation will be.
Yeah, exactly. And it also goes to show like how the history can be and was manipulated.
Yeah.
You know, by, again, the adults or by people who want to have it seen a specific way.
Well, whoever writes down the tale, right, is writing it from their own perspective. Yeah, exactly. So, of course.
That's it. And then reveals, like, you know, who the actual true villain is.
Yeah.
And you get the full story of actually what is going on and how things are twisted.
Yeah.
By, you know, just very simple actions by that the kids are doing whatever it is. They're partying in the woods. They're not even doing anything.
They're not doing anything. They're not injuring anyone. They're not destroying property. They're not doing anything.
They're just having some fermented berries. Like,
yeah, they're just getting a weird high from the fermented berries.
Exactly. And then all of that ties in back. So because like the third movie, the 1666, is actually a two-parter.
Yeah.
Right? So the first part is the back in time,
the way
and
back,
then the second part is the thing that wraps it up and wraps up the whole trilogy.
Yeah, back in 1994, they bring it full circle, reveal who the true villain is, and then the characters are able to solve essentially the mystery and to save Shadyside, which is essentially what it is that they wind up being able to do by the end.
Yeah.
It's just
it's very good.
It's a cool series. It was like well written, mapped out, and put together, which I really appreciate. There was obviously like a lot of thought put into how they would kind of, you know, depict each different generation, how they would tie everything together, like what the actual through line would look like. And then there's, you know, a lot of work done from a production standpoint, but also for the actors as well, because a lot of the actors play different characters in multiple entries in the series. You know, a lot of the people who are in 1994 are also in 1666, and some of the people in 1978 are also in 1666, and they bounce back and forth a little bit because it creates a cohesion. Yeah. Kind of in the series, so that you're still like, oh yes, okay, I feel like I'm still in the same franchise, even though these are taking place at wildly different time periods.
Well, that's why they filmed the three movies back to back.
Yeah.
Right? They started with
the second one, I think? They started with 94, then they did 1666, and then they did 1978 last.
That's it, exactly.
Because apparently it was originally supposed to be directed by someone else who had to step out due to like scheduling issues, and so Lee Janiak co-wrote, I think, all of them, but she wound up directing all three of them.
That's it.
By the end of it.
So like the way that it flows and everything, there's, like you were saying, cohesion and everything that
you
works.
Feel it. Well, you feel really it also,
well.
You know, you feel it with the cast too, because these people had obviously been like previously working on other entries together, so like there's an ease you can tell in the way that everyone's sort of chemistry is with one another and everything, which I think works really well for the series. And yeah, I mean, like genuinely, like overall there are pretty good performances in it across the board, you know, especially because it must be hard to hop from like, I'm in this time period now, like, you know, like, oh, I'm in the 70s and I'm wearing like bell bottoms, and now I'm in 1666 and I have like a bonnet on and stuff, and I'm supposed to be from the way back.
Yeah. And so this kind of like closes this trilogy, but a few years later, which is now, the way that the last movie finished left it open.
Oh, definitely.
A little bit to maybe they're going to do something else, maybe they're going to continue with this, etc., whatever it is. But now there is Fear Street Prom Queen.
Yes,
that is happening. Right.
Which is, like I said, dropping May 23rd, so the day that this episode drops, that will be available on Netflix. So my understanding is that it's definitely separate from, I don't believe that any of the actors are repeated in Prom Queen from anything that we've seen. The filmmakers are different, and I'm sure that it will be different. That is set...
It's supposed to be like a standalone thing. It maybe might introduce kind of like a whole anthology
own anthology thing,
Yeah, that's it. So like it is related. It is still set in the same town. Maybe it's going to have something to do with the ending of the last movie. Maybe because there's like
or like maybe we'll see some sort of callback to something, or even characters that will be mentioned off camera by name or something, right?
Yeah, maybe. But so it is the first adaptation that actually follows a specific book.
It does,
right?
yes.
So it kind of like, has a little bit of a new direction that way.
Yes, yeah. And it follows Fear Street, Prom Queen. It follows the exact
Exactly.
title
That's it.
of the book.
Well, actually, you know why? I think that makes a lot of sense because apparently Prom Queen was one of the most fan-loved books of the original
really?
series.
Okay.
Yeah, at least that's what R.L. Stine said.
Oh, okay.
So I guess that's why, they really wanted to make it like about the book, not just like a...
Yeah, that makes sense. If they were going to do that one, then they were probably going to focus on the specific story. Yeah, so Prom Queen, what we're aware of is it's set in 1988.
Yeah, which is between the events of the trilogy we just spoke about.
Yes, it's between 78 and 94. So still takes place at Shadyside High at prom, and essentially a killer, we don't know who, but a killer is like, stalking and picking off the students at Shadyside High, I think on prom night, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, so it's the Prom Queen candidate starting to turn up dead.
Oh, that's
right?
it. Okay, yeah.
And the main character becomes a reluctant heroine.
Kieran, yeah, because she has no choice but to figure out why this is happening, obviously. Yeah. So that one will be fun too, because it'll give us a different flavor of stylization, because they were all the original one, 3 films were very different stylistically because they were taking place during different time periods, and this is just like another entry into that. It takes place in 1988, so you're getting late 80s, big hair, poofy dresses, sequins probably all over the place, because we're heading into that late 80s era. So 1994 has like a very grunge kind of tone to it. Like everything feels like it's like a Nirvana video or something. But this one's going to be probably a lot more like poppy that way.
I feel like it's going to have some kind of like a Carrie-like vibes to it, or movies like that.
Maybe. Carrie, I mean, it's so easy, right, to be like, oh, it's going to be like Carrie. It's going to be like Prom Night. It's going to be like night. All of the other ones that are like that. Although Carrie was a little earlier from what I remember. Right? Yeah, it must have been. Anyway. So I'm curious to see how that's sort of going to shake out. And also, if that's the case too, if it's a book in the franchise that's really popular, then I'm really curious to see kind of what people's feelings are about it, if that's the case. So that'll be... Yeah.
I don't know. It looks very interesting. So apparently, at least from the book, there's like multiple red herrings.
Oh, okay.
That happens during the story. So I feel like it's going to be very similar in this movie as well.
Yeah.
Even from the trailer, I was like, okay, well, it could be this, could be that.
Yeah.
Could be this. So I think that it probably will take a very, very similar approach. We'll find out, on Friday.
On today.
So very interesting. We'll see. Hopefully, if this one also does well, because from what I understand, the other 3 movies also did pretty well.
They did,
considering they decided to do another one.
Yeah.
It will be very different since it's a new direction.
Yeah.
New producers and directors, from what I understand.
Yes, yeah.
And everything. So, hopefully it is as good. It might open up a continuation of adaptations.
It is possible.
From him, right? So, it could be an anthology thing. It could be not a multiverse, but what is it, like a universe setting that just happens, like a bunch of different things.
Yes, like a cinematic universe.
Exactly, that's it. Yeah. Because they could keep doing that. And,
because you could just have your Fear Street cinematic universe, essentially, that all exists within Shadyside and that world, but, separate stories at different time periods and everything that help to separate things a little bit. So you can have some continuity, you can have some callbacks and things, but they don't all necessarily have to be like one straight storyline because of that, which is, it's an interesting idea. Yeah. Anyway.
It could work really well, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like for people who maybe aren't as familiar, didn't grow up with it, anything along those lines, when we were growing up, R.L. Stine was the thing for a while there, and I definitely feel as though Goosebumps gets a lot of that. I mean, God, there's a TV show on right now. Is it Hulu or Disney or whatever, have a TV show?
Oh, yeah, that one. Yeah, it's actually good,
which they've also, my understanding is they've done as an anthology, because I believe the second season was released this year, and it's different actors, different characters, all that
and it's
stuff.
Well done, too.
Yeah, we watched that first season. It was pretty good. So, hey. So I feel like they're just going to keep going with that. So really, like, I don't know, we're having like a funny sort of resurgence of R.L. Stine stuff. There was definitely a period in which like we didn't see any of it at all.
And then they did the movies with Jack Black, which were also good.
Yeah,
they were
I don't
fun,
know if I saw the second one, but the first one was okay.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah,
and it kind of like.
And that, like, you know, it got very, like, meta with it because he's starring as the character and all that. Like, he's starring as R.L. Stine, blah, 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 whatever. And his books are coming to life, like, those sorts of things. Definitely more, like, you know, leaning on, like, the kids side of things. So, again, Goosebumps, it's more family-friendly as a rule. Although I will say the TV show is darker. Like, it takes things in a slightly different direction that way. So I wonder if because of this now, like, you know, that's it. We're just having this like this sort of fun resurgence, and what that will maybe mean, first of all, like you're saying, for future entries, but what that'll mean even for R.L. Stine properties in general, just being either adapted or this or that, or maybe being introduced to like a slightly younger generation who possibly like the hype had died down for, so they wouldn't necessarily have read the books or watched the original TV show growing up or anything. You know, like we all grew up with like Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark? And those were
that was fun.
Like the fun, spooky shows that you watched when you were a kid, which were very big in the 90s. But for kids who were born much later than that, they wouldn't necessarily have been exposed to it. And like I said, a lot of R.L. Stine stuff had died down for a period of time at that point. So I wonder if this is going to give things like kind of a resurgence to an extent, in the sense that now like a newer generation can kind of be like, oh, hey, or is this all going to be just for all of us old people who are like, yay, I used to read this.
It's for all of us who are having kids, and now we can just call.
And we can be like, I know what this is.
Yeah, and we can be like, hey, you know, this used to be really cool, and here you go, discover it.
Yeah, that's true. Like, this is something, like, because people do that, right? Like, with their kids, with, like, movies and music and all that stuff. So I wonder if it's going to do the same kind of thing, which would be cool.
Hey, why not?
I would be happy with that.
That'd be pretty good.
I mean, listen, like, it might get redundant, and there might be 10 bazillion entries into every series that he writes, but the fact that it's still happening to this day, in my opinion, really speaks to, like, R.L. Stine's particular way of capturing, like, how to spook kids out. He really, really knows how to come up with original ideas as well. Yeah. If you go back and reread those Goosebumps books that are like still hiding somewhere on your bookshelves from when you were a kid, and you're like, wow, how did he come up with the idea of this? Like, you know, where it's like, oh, this haunted camera that like does something like Say Cheese and Die, you know, like that just like does that to you. That's one of the episodes with Ryan Gosling in it. Also, for anybody who wants like a little weird callback, he's in like a couple of episodes of Goosebumps and 1 or 2 episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Because they were all filmed in Canada. Thank you very much. So if you ever want to get funny little throwbacks to like people who are actually famous now, you can go and watch those things and be like, oh shit, wow.
That's where they started.
Yeah.
Almost. Well,
kind of. Yeah. I don't know what else I have to say except that this franchise is just fun and I like it, and I'm happy that we're actually getting more, and it wasn't just a one-off and then we never heard anything about it ever again.
Yeah, I hope they keep it going.
Me too.
Take some of the best books, the most interesting ones, whatever it is.
And like go do the stuff, because that's it. Since there are like 50 entries in that series, there's so much to pick from in terms of maybe either straight adaptation or inspiration for something.
Combine things.
Exactly.
Make it work together. Do it. Do it, Netflix.
Do it. Keep going with this. It'll just appeal to the teen set. And it is a good like sort of intro for maybe like, I don't know, like teenagers who are getting into like horror stuff, but maybe don't know where to start. Like, it's a good, pretty straightforward entry, I would say, like entrance point for you. It's gory, but it's not like so over the top that you're like, okay, no one's going to watch this. Yay. I'm excited. Okay. Maybe we'll try to...
Well, we're just going to go watch it right now.
We're going to go watch it right now, yeah. And maybe we'll try to come back and talk about it if we can. We'll see. We'll see what we can do. Cool. Okay. So, anyway, in the meantime, obviously feel free to check out everything we have going on over on the website at fullybooked.ca. Follow us on all of our social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky. Search for Fully Booked CA and you'll find us. But until next week, guys, keep on reading.
Ciao, guys.
Thank you.